Right. I've used this title before, but I like it. Deliberate Myth Takes. Okay, so we've established all the biblical facts, right? Of Yeshua's final Pesach Seder. And we all got copies of the timeline of his death and resurrection, right? And yet, you and others still have questions, right? Well, it is a pretty big religious bubble to burst when you tell people these things. We burst this bubble of thousands of years of man's traditions, myths and legends. And we've confronted and challenged them up front, right? So let's face it, who do we think we are? Fancy studying the Word for ourselves and connecting it with Jewish culture and translation. Well, here's another bubble burster. I come at it from all different angles because they try and pursue this myth of Friday night to Sunday morning. And I like to come at it from different angles just to nail it. And here's another one. Even if Yeshua had actually died on Yom Shishi, which is a Friday, he still had to fulfill the promise of 3 nights and 3 days. Now, even if it had been Friday night, he would have had to actually rise on Yom Sheni or Monday. Between dusk and sundown. And the women, even ignoring Shabbat problems, would still have had to wait to visit the tomb until Yom Shleshei or Tuesday morning. So no matter which way they try and spin it, on either end, it doesn't work. If it had been 3 days and 3 nights from Friday night, they would have visited the tomb on Tuesday morning. So would that have been the new Lord's Day? The prophecy trumps any other theory that they have. It has to be 3 days, it has to be 3 full nights.
But what was the cause of him saying Friday?
Because they didn't understand, they saw Shabbat. So they thought, oh, it's Shabbat, so it must be the Friday night, the start of Shabbat. They knew nothing about festival Shabbats. And all of this happened on a festival Shabbat as Pesach Seder, which on this case was on the Tuesday night. So all this went through, and that's why he actually rose on Shabbat. There's no other way it could have happened, prophetically in every other way. And the reason that Sunday morning happened is because they went in the dark on what for them would still have been the Saturday anyway. Yeah. And then when it got light on the Sunday, they said, oh, this is the day he rose. No, he rose the evening before. They just visited the tomb the next day after he'd risen. Everything was all neatly folded up and everything. So no, their theories, the Friday night to Sunday morning is a day and a half. So how does that fit the prophecy of 3 days and 3 full nights? He's precise to the minute, to the second, always. He doesn't half do things. Whichever way they try and cut it, it had to be 3 full days, it had to be 3 full nights. So either it's the real thing where he went and rose again on the Saturday, or he rose on the Tuesday. They can't have it both ways. They can't have Sunday. It doesn't work. And Sunday is not the last day of the week, it's the first day of the week. In Israel, everybody goes to work Sunday morning. First day of the week. It's their Monday. We turn and say, oh no, it's not Monday again. In Israel, they say, oh no, it's not Sunday again. So meanwhile, back in reality, again, as we've read in Yochanan 12, it says, 6 days before Pesach, on Nissan the 8th, Shlishi, the Tuesday that year, Yeshua had a special dinner at the house of Elazar, the man who'd raised him from the dead, and sat at the table with him as Miriam anointed him with a whole half-litre of pure oil of spikenard, whichever it's pronounced. But that half-litre was worth a full year's wage. So what's the average wage here? $50,000, $60,000? So it cost the equivalent of $50,000, $60,000. So the religious authorities couldn't have that and decided to stop them and get rid of both of them. Yeshua and Eleazar. Because Eleazar's resurrection caused large numbers to stop following them. If they thought that was a problem, wait for what happens when Yeshua is resurrected. Again, he had the dinner, and he particularly chose to have it with him, because again, he was pointing to what was about to happen. It was fulfilling prophecy. So, of course, to have them, large numbers, stop following them and following Yeshua, just like today, they couldn't have that, could they? They couldn't have people actually finding out the truth for themselves and not being completely under their control, and certainly not paying temple taxes and tithes. And of course we see a similar backlash from today's religious leaders for all the same reasons. So on the next day, Yom Revi, or the Gentile Wednesday, not Sunday again, people heard he was coming to Jerusalem to Pesach and took lulav or palm branches and went out to meet him. So it was actually Palm Wednesday, not Palm Sunday. They get it wrong every time. And they made a remarkable statement. They said, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The King of Israel. A condition that Yeshua gave for his return. He said, I will return when they say that same statement, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. But he was talking about the second time in Matthew 23:39. In other words, he was saying, this is just a prophetic dress rehearsal for the real thing when I return. And he talks about it in Revelation 7:9-17. And he also says we have to have ahava, he'emet, or a love of the truth, or we can never have real freedom. Right now, today, Yahweh is revealing the reality of his body as a valley of dry bones, just like Israel. Israel at the moment, the dry bones have come together. He's putting flesh, ligaments on their bodies, but he hasn't yet breathed into their nostrils. And that is the part I'm looking forward to. Because when he breathes into their nostril, Israel will become Israel again. Not just physical Israel, but spiritual Israel. His question, can these bones live? At the end of the Second World War, people would have said no. But he had other ideas. And in 1948, these bones lived. And they've lived, and they've expanded, and they've grown, and they've flourished. They're not just hanging on by their fingernails. And he said to them, prophesy restoration to them, and tell them, I will make breath enter you, and you will live. I will attach ligaments to you, I'll make flesh grow on you, I'll cover you with skin and put breath into you. Notice the two separate things. You will live and you will know that I am Yahweh. And then they stood up on their feet, a huge army. And he's talking about a spiritual army. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood. And in Israel, we are the Israeli defense force. We're not the Israeli attack force. The Israeli defense force is there to defend Israel, not to be antagonistic and go out all over the world and attack other people like some other nations. It's a defense force, that's all it is. And nobody would love there to be no need for it more than Israeli parents. And the guys themselves and the women themselves. It's just unfortunately necessary. For those that haven't heard it yet, the shofar is sounding the alarm today. And a call to assembly. The shofar was blown for different reasons in the camp. One, to bring the leaders. Another one, to bring everybody. And another one, to sound the alarm. When they were on the walls and they were rebuilding the walls, they had to keep a sword at their side. And they had to keep on building at the same time. And unfortunately, some people focus completely on the sword at their sides, and some people focus on the building. But we actually have to have balance and do both. But when the shofar blew, wherever the problem was, and people threatened to breach the wall, everybody came together to defend that patch of the wall. And as a messianic body, that's what we need to do today. When one part of that body has a problem, when we hear the shofar, when we hear that call, that alarm, we need to come together and help defend it and be a united body. So the shofar's sounding a call to assembly. He's calling the leaders to come together, and then he will call the body to come together. He's restoring his body here on earth. He's calling from deep to deep. And he's inviting his wandering children to come together and turn towards home. He wants his Jewish children to make Aliyah and come home to Israel. And if they won't do it voluntarily, he'll make sure that circumstances push them home. There's a lot of people leaving France. There's even a lot of people leaving America. A lot of people leaving England, Australia, New Zealand. It's time to go home. And for a Jewish person, the safest place in the world to be is Israel. I know that's not what you read in the news, but it's true. He knows every one of us intimately. He knows who you are, where you came from. Why? Because he knitted your DNA together. Can you hear him calling you right now? And if you can, how are you going to respond? Your parents wouldn't be very pleased if they kept calling you and you didn't respond. You need to respond one way or the other. We need to read the manufacturer's instructions. Because if you walk in the light, you will always see where you're going. If you don't, you'll just stumble around in the dark like everybody else, which will automatically void the Maker's guarantee. What I see out there is like a world's like a giant pinball machine. And there's people pressing buttons and there's people banging off all sorts of different things, and they don't really know where they're going. They're being manipulated. It's so simple. Walking around in the darkness is making it up as you go along. And that's what mostly the world has done. It's made it up as it's gone along. All these myths and legends and all this other stuff is just something they made up because it sounds good. You can't talk about it. You can't tell them it's wrong. What about the children? The children love the bunnies. They love the eggs. They love the Christmas trees. I understand. I've had the pressure from my own kids. Oh, you can't not do it. What about the grandchildren? A few years ago, a son came from overseas and brought the grandchildren with us and tried to lay that one on us one Christmas. And we said no. And anyway, we went out shopping, we came back and there was a Christmas tree there. He kind of nicked it while we weren't there. And he put all the lights on and it was like, what are you going to do about it now? Your grandchildren have seen it, they're excited. And I just prayed about it and I felt fine. I just prayed that Abba would deal with it. Next day, we went out and there was this dead tree on the deck. All the branches had fallen off. It was brown. There wasn't a single bit of green on it anywhere. He never said a word. The tree just died overnight. Like most children, he just likes to test the doors and see if they're still shut. Children don't actually want the door to be open. They just want to be able to test it, because if they test it and it's still closed, it makes them feel secure. If you try to understand things with the mind only, you will constantly fail. You will constantly be confused. And you'll constantly go round and round and round in circles, trying to figure out false conclusions. You'll continually continue to bump into things. And as you bump into things, you'll think, I've discovered the truth. Otherwise known as human philosophy. But unfortunately, a lot of things you bump into are the bits just before you fall over the cliff and get hopelessly lost. So trying to understand this in these circumstances is like me showing you a beautiful piece of artwork in a pitch black room, wearing a blindfold and earplugs, listening to a taped message from the artist himself as he explains his inspiration. And then afterwards expecting you to describe the intricacies of form, the subtle shades, the precise brush strokes and the vivid splashes of colour. And then also making you describe what message the artist is conveying and what it means to you personally. Most people today are constantly bumping into things in the dark. And when they do that, they describe the encounter one-dimensionally, because that's all you can do. Because it's just one aspect that they bumped into by mistake. And they feel the leg or the trunk of an elephant with closed eyes. It doesn't really tell you what an elephant looks like, and does. All you know about is the leg, because you just bumped into it. You don't know about the rest of the animal. You don't understand its shape, its dimensions, its form, its colour, or its function. And it certainly doesn't give you a picture of its feelings or relationships, or what its home territory looked like when it came. You can look at the leg of an elephant in a zoo in New Zealand, and you'll know nothing about Africa, nothing about the rest of it. You won't see the rest of the animal until it trumpets in your ear, and then you might get a clue. To some people, reading the long list of genealogies in the Tanakh is a cold and boring exercise. But to me, it's exciting. This is my family album. It's not cold and meaningless to me. The genealogies in there, it's my history. It's my family. It's exciting. It's my personal history. It's a link to my past relatives, and a joy as I read of Abba's love and trustworthiness down through the generations. And the thing that excites me most is he fulfills his promise through ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. There's nobody in there that's a superhero when he first encounters them. They're just ordinary people. And they make the same ordinary mistakes I do. What was that thing I saw during the week? Oh, I know what it was. If we learn from our mistakes, then some of us today must be geniuses. The actual thing that I read was, my parents told me that when you make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes. So I'm going to make as many as possible so I'll be a genius one day. To some, the past isn't relevant. And yet without it and its lessons learned, there is no positive future. No firm foundation to build on. And without a foundation, no building can stand. You cannot read Yahweh's words with your mind and try and analyse it. It doesn't work. It's not meant to be read that way. You will never discover the immense wealth, the treasure inside, if you try and do it with your mind. You have to read with your spirit. And when you do that, you will find and encounter a precious treasure trove buried under the surface. And as you examine the precious nuggets and jewels and go deeper and deeper and deeper, the more breathtaking they become. It never ceases to amaze me, and there are many people here that have been doing it for a lot longer than I have, but it never ceases to amaze me how I can go in there and I can read the same pages I've been reading for 40 odd years and get something new out of it and something exciting out of it. And I was thinking, why didn't I see that before? How many times have I read it? How many times have I seen it? And even again, other times you think, I don't remember this bit. I've read the whole thing many times, and yet I look at it and I think, it's like looking at something for the first time. You will never, ever come to the end of it. There's always something new. There's always something deeper. Like the believers during the communist regime described themselves like nails. The harder you hit, the deeper we go. That's why we pray, Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, give us an ear to hear and understand what Yahweh is saying to His body. Now it says in Revelation all the time, give them an ear to hear what the Spirit is saying to the body. They know they've got physical ears. It's not what it's talking about. Give us an ear to hear and understand what Yahweh is saying to His body, not by might, not by power, but by His Spirit. And that's the still, gentle, not small, it's just a gentle, peaceful, powerful, loving voice of a father to his children. Many will say, I don't hear Him. And you can tell they're very upset about it. It's like other people hear Him, but I can't hear Him. Probably because they're trying to listen to Him with these and understand with this. And as I've said many times before, first of all, if you can't hear Him, are you sure you're tuned into the right channel? Or are you just getting static, white noise? You have to be tuned in to the right channel to pick it up. If you're not tuned into the right channel, you won't hear it. Second, as relationship is the key itself, the more time you spend with Him, the more you will learn to hear Him and trust Him and recognize His voice. As you learn to ignore and tune out all of the surrounding distractions. And I've used this illustration before, and it's a good illustration. In a supermarket full of screaming, yelling kids during the school holidays, and people everywhere with baskets full of shopping, a mother will hear her child crying at the other end of the store. Why? Because there's a relationship there, and the voices, immediately she recognises it. This is my child. There are many other screaming children, but she knows, and she'll go straight over there to that child. She's spent time with them, she's got a relationship with them, she recognises it. Our kids, when they ring on the phone, they don't have to say, oh, this is Debbie. The minute they get on the phone, Pamela says, hello, Debbie, because she knows straight away. The voice is there, the relationship is there. Except when it's our grandson, when he first does it, and you forget, he's got a strong Australian accent. Even though he was born in New Zealand. He used to have a good New Zealand accent. Now he sounds like an Ocker. But yeah, when you're in a relationship with somebody, the voice doesn't have to shout. You recognise the voice. You hear that voice. You respond to that voice. Thirdly, as we come together as kehilah and share, we will get confirmations and encouragements from each other that will encourage and witness that we're hearing accurately. People get upset and they say, oh, that prophecy was terrible. And I turn around and say, he's learning, she's learning. Children, when they first start learning, make mistakes. It's part of the process. Unless they do it and learn, it's like a 5-year-old that can't speak because they're too frightened to say anything in case they get it wrong. But if you give them the freedom to say stupid things, I mean, how many of your kids say stuff you can't understand a word of it when they're till 1, 2, whatever. Although some mothers do understand it, and some twins understand each other, but to everybody else it's gibberish. But you give them the freedom to learn and develop, and you encourage them. And one of the ways to do that is when they come to something like this, and somebody will say something, or pray something, or prophesy something, and you'll think, that's what I'm getting. That's what I heard. And it encourages people. And they think, I am hearing. I am getting it right. We will get confirmations and encouragements that encourage and witness that we're hearing accurately. Remember, as I constantly say, prophecy is always confirmation of Abba's word to you. Or if you're prophesying to someone else, it's not revelation. It doesn't come out of nowhere. He will always speak to the person involved first. Then you will get prophesy, and it's only designed to confirm what they've heard. It's not designed to be a revelation. So if you've got lots of things that you've had prophesied to you, and it's never happened, or you're not really sure what it's about, stick it on the shelf. Because unless he's talked to you about it first, ignore it. We are like the small child that looks at the world's man-made religions and power systems and daring to speak the truth. You ever notice that young children don't realise that they can't just speak the truth? They don't have to be diplomatic. They see something and they speak the truth about it. Deaf people are like that. When you see deaf people signing, they don't muck around, they tell you. They just, they don't do the diplomatic thing, they just boom. These self-made emperors that we see have no spiritual clothes on them. You know the story, the emperor's new clothes? Well, the world's like that. They've all been told that they're absolutely fabulous. But they have no spiritual clothes on. They're miserable and naked and don't even realise it. Why? Because they're so busy being puffed up with their own importance and being absolutely fabulous that they don't see the truth. That they have been conned along with everyone else who serves them into parading past us and claiming that they're wearing these fabulous clothes. And yet a 5-year-old child can see that they've got no clothes on. And the reason they parade past us is they expect everyone to tell them what they want to hear. Because just like the Emperor's New Clothes storyline, that only special people can see these spiritual clothes, and nobody wants to admit that they're not a special person. Nobody wants to admit that they're not one of the ones that can see the clothes, so they all turn around and say, aren't they fabulous? Aren't they wonderful? No one will ever admit that they can't see them, except for a young child that just speaks the truth. That's why we're like the small child. We're looking out there and we're saying, I know you're telling us you're wearing all these fabulous things and doing all these fabulous things, but we can see it. You're naked. You've got no clothes on. And these world systems and their leaders think they're so powerful and so strong and so entrenched in society that no one will ever challenge them. If you really want to upset somebody, even hint at challenging any of these things, and boom, it'll explode in your face. Confrontation isn't the way to go. The Romans thought that they were invincible, as did the Greeks and the British, who secretly still do. And all the other puffed up little empires that are strewn by the wayside. They all thought that they were completely untouchable. But it's time for Yahweh's body to rise up and take its rightful place. And I'm talking about the quiz show that used to be around years ago, and you get 3 different people, and they all had to pretend to be the same person with the same background, and it was somebody's job to try and figure out which of the 3 of them was telling the truth and which 2 were telling lies. And at the end of it all, they always used to say, will the real, whatever his name was, stand up? 9 times out of 10 people got a shock, because it usually wasn't the person they'd chosen. Well, Yahweh is saying the same thing to his body. Will the real body please stand up? And people are going to get a shock, because it won't be what they think it's going to be. It won't be happening in cathedrals and Gothic buildings and whatever. It's time for the body to rise up and take its rightful place. Yeshua is preparing his bride, and he's put the world's religious establishments on notice. Bow the knee today to all of his plans and his purposes, or suffer the consequences. That's already happening. You've heard me talk about before about the time of the Gentiles. There'll be a time when the time of the Gentiles will be over. It's happening right now. The time of the Gentiles, in that sense, is coming to an end. And people are on notice. And some people are hearing the call of the shofar. And so many people are turning around saying, I don't know what the answer is, but I know it's not this. Why am I coming here? Well, there's nothing better, there's nothing else. Yahweh is the King of Kings, the Creator and the ruler of the whole universe. And unlike all of these self-important hierarchies, they're just like specks of dust. They will be blown away. It says so in the Word. All these people that rise up in self-importance are like specks of dust and will be blown away. So shalom Talmudim, faithful ones. Shalom.